As the Biden auto-pen pardon controversy heats back up, there's still the pressing question. Cool scandal, bro, but what are you going to do about it? Yes, Joe Biden signed, or air quotes signed, many of his end-of-term pardons, including those for Dr. Fauci, Mark Milley, January 6th committee members, the Biden family, and more, using an auto-pen. That much is not in dispute. And maybe the use of a machine to sign those documents doesn't matter, so long as the president personally approved each individual pardon. But that's the thing. Even before this latest report, was that brain hanging on sufficiently to approve of anything in the final days of his presidency? And now we have this New York Times report saying it outright. No, Joe Biden did not personally approve of each individual pardon. This according to Joe Biden himself and his aides speaking with these New York Times reporters. Now, to be precise, that claim in the reporting says Biden didn't individually approve each pardon for broad categories of pardons that he issued, like those for nonviolent drug offenders. So this reporting doesn't tell us with certainty whether Biden did personally approve the high-profile pardons he issued auto-penned at the same time. Fauci, Milley, J6 committee, his family. But of course, this process deployed even once naturally raises the question, how widely was this process deployed overall? Because if these uninformed auto-pen pardons happened at least some of the time, which Biden and his aides now admit they did, how do we know they didn't happen all of the time, or at least for all of those in his last days in office? But even if so, even if every Biden pardon was auto-penned without his individual approval, that pesky question remains. What are you going to do about it? And I don't just mean that in a you won't no balls dare kind of way. I mean that legally. I mean it constitutionally. What are you going to do about it? Because it's not at all clear there is anything to be done. Under Article 2, the president's pardon power is nearly absolute. According to the text, the only limitations are the president can only pardon for federal offenses, which is the case here, and the pardons don't protect the president or other federal office holders from impeachment. Congress can't undo a pardon, even if every member in both chambers voted to, and implicitly, at least as far as our case law extends, neither can the courts. Maybe if the president tried to pardon a state crime, the courts would stop that, or maybe if the president tried to stop an impeachment with a pardon, there's clear constitutional text against that too, so maybe the courts would intervene there. But on any other pardon controversies, it is not clear that the courts have any role. In fact, the opposite is much more clear. They have none, at least as far as this area of the law has been challenged, or not. There's not a lot of case law on the matter. It is notable, though, that the Supreme Court has established some additional pardon rules that are not explicit in the constitutional text. A pardoned person has to accept the pardon for it to be valid, for example. That standard was established in a case where President Wilson tried to pardon a man as a means to force his testimony, since if he was pardoned, he could no longer plead the fifth and stay silent. Pardons also can't cover future crimes, though strictly speaking, the constitutional text doesn't say that, but you can't pardon a guy for crimes he might commit later, giving him indefinite future immunity. Why not? Well, because that's contrary to the history and tradition of how pardons worked and were understood at the time of the founding. Pardons didn't work that way under English law, so they don't work that way here either. Now, if you can't pardon for future crimes because that's undefined or not sufficiently specific, in other words, it's preemptive, it's getting ahead of a charge that might come, not one that actually has, why can you preemptively pardon for past possible crimes? Because if the principle is the charge must come before the pardon, well, there might be a case that Biden's broad preemptive pardons were invalid for that reason too, plus the auto-pen questions about his intent and consent. I made a video considering these arguments more thoroughly in the context of the Hunter Biden pardon back in December. Now, remember, that pardon was signed by hand before this auto-pen scandal, but that video is linked in the description if you'd like to listen to it. But whether the scandal is preemptive pardons or auto-penned pardons or pardons not even done by the president himself or all of the above, there is still the question with which we opened. What are you going to do about it? Because even if you want to raise one of these potential legal problems, that the president didn't intend or consent to the pardon, or the president didn't actually sign the pardon, or the pardon is preemptive, lacking definition, contrary to the history and tradition of how pardons work, who's going to bring that challenge? You need standing to do it. You need a direct stake in the case. You can't just be a guy who doesn't like it and says it's unconstitutional. The courts will not hear that case. You have no legitimacy to bring it. But you know who does have direct involvement and therefore prospective standing in this matter? The pardoned people. Dr. Fauci, Mark Milley, J6 committee members, the Biden family. If they were criminally charged despite their pardons, well, now you have a controversy that the courts must resolve. And implicitly, the reason that Biden or whoever pardoned these people did so is because they all could theoretically face charges in prosecution. No charges were ever filed, but the charges are realistic enough that the Biden administration wanted to protect against them. The charges are so realistic, in fact, that one of these guys comes with a pre-existing criminal referral from Congress, actually. Dr. Fauci for lying to Congress. Now, of course, I and many others believe that Dr. Fauci's crimes are much deeper and more significant than just lying to Congress. But in this case, it's not about what's the worst crime. It's about what's the strongest criminal case beyond a reasonable doubt. And well beyond a reasonable doubt, Dr. Fauci lied to Congress under oath. He's on video doing it. In 2021 congressional testimony, Dr. Fauci said insistently, responding to questions from Senator Rand Paul, that the National Institutes of Health, under his leadership, does not and has never funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
The NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Do they fund Dr. Barrick?
Dr. Fauci tried to play with the definition of gain-of-function research to explain it away, but we now know that they did that. They funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. NIH grant money went to a New York nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance, which subcontracted with the Wuhan Institute of Virology to modify bat viruses. The NIH under Joe Biden then terminated EcoHealth's grant money in 2022 because EcoHealth had not been sufficiently transparent about this work. And then in May 2024, the Health and Human Services Department, again under Joe Biden, terminated all federal money for EcoHealth. And Dr. Fauci cannot say that he didn't know or made a mistake. In a February 2020 email between Fauci and Francis Collins, then NIH director, Fauci discussed concerns about the gain-of-function research happening at the Wuhan lab, the one our grant money goes to. And Fauci had a chance to fix any mistake. Following these revelations, Rand Paul gave Dr. Fauci an opportunity to correct the record, and Dr. Fauci declined.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement.
Ironically, itself another lie about lying. It really is impressive to outlie Congress, but Dr. Fauci pulled it off. But for this lie and for his refusal to correct the record when given the chance, Rand Paul then referred Dr. Fauci to the Justice Department for a perjury prosecution in 2023. Notice the letter is addressed to then Attorney General Merrick Garland, who probably never even read it. But now the times have changed. There's a new Attorney General who much more plausibly might prosecute Dr. Fauci. So in light of these new pardon legitimacy questions, Rand Paul has now referred Dr. Fauci to the DOJ for prosecution, or maybe referred, emphasis on because that's probably all this will be. Another exercise in as in just screeching that won't amount to anything legally consequential. So how does this realistically play out? Well, my guess is the Attorney General doesn't even bring a charge. Nothing happens. Even if she does, that case would get dismissed by the district court, citing the pardon. Then the case gets appealed to the appellate and Supreme Court, who almost certainly does not want to open the legal can of worms that is the court taking authority on what is and is not a valid presidential pardon on very constitutionally questionable terms. And even if the court does have questions about the validity of the pardon process in this particular case, They can just ask Joe Biden, who is allegedly still alive, "Hey, Joe, is this what you intended?" And he'll say, "Of course, Jack," and he'll lick an ice cream cone, and he'll do 5 push-ups to emphasize his vitality, and that'll be the end of the analysis. And as disappointing as that is, I think that probably is the correct answer constitutionally. If the framers wanted additional restrictions on the pardon power, they could have written them in there. They didn't. The check on the pardon power is not the courts. It's Congress through the impeachment of a president who abuses that power. That's why pardons can't protect from impeachments constitutionally. Now, that's not very satisfying in this particular scenario because the president is already out of office. So even the impeachment power is meaningless in this case. So what's left is some possible or probable serious crooks with very broad, in many of these cases, decade-long immunity on very questionable pardon terms, according to the people who issued these pardons themselves, with no legal way to challenge or undo that abuse. But while I'm not clear there is anything that can be done about it legally, it doesn't mean it's not worth a try. Because yeah, it is new, untested legal territory, but it's at least plausible, and there's really no downside to testing it. You bring a charge against Fauci, maybe the courts reject it. If they do, okay, so what? That's the end of that, I guess. You tried. Oh, but that'll be perceived as a political prosecution. Okay, and political prosecutions have become normalized, indeed fashionable, in recent years. On much more ridiculous legal ground, actually. If political prosecutions are so terrible, well, maybe they shouldn't have been done 6 times over during the last election cycle. Maybe one piece of revenge lawfare is actually fair play, according to the new rules. Because after all, nobody is above the law, right? Dr. Fauci provably broke it. He was graciously offered an opportunity to fix it. He refused. Yes, his pardon protection is also a part of the law to the extent it was validly applied, but was it? We have a legal option to find out. Plus, rightly or wrongly, an attorney general's time in office is always political. They make decisions about what types of crime to prioritize, and that comes at the expense of other types of crime that don't receive as much attention. Yes, attorneys general pursue justice, or at least they should primarily, but they also pursue a positive public image, as any politician does. What I'm saying is for a current attorney general with some reputational problems lately, I don't think charging Fauci will do any damage. I think it'll help, actually. There could be a lot of Epstein forgiveness for this move, and she could become the Lloyd Christmas of AGs.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself.
So please, Pam, fire up that mini bike and take us to Aspen. Better yet, pick up Dr. Fauci for his prison term on it. That Keebler elf will fit perfectly on that tiny back seat. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on X, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams as live on Wednesday and Sunday nights. Looking forward to it. Correct. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, that means you probably found some value in the video. If you found some value in the video, please consider supporting my material. You can do that one time or recurring for as little as $1 a month. It not only helps me sustain, but it helps me pay the people who make my videos possible. Linked in the description for you, mattchristiansenmedia.com/support. Thanks for listening.